Hello, and welcome back to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. This is Geek Out number 87 over Axiom, a Divine Dungeon series, Artorian Archive, Book 1 by Dennis Vanderkerken and Dakota Krout. And yeah, thoroughly enjoy the book. Spoilers ahead. You've been warned. And then some of you may be further in the series. The series is, like where book 8 just got released on Kindle. We're minor causal connection spoilers to the Divine Dungeon series, but we're going to kind of try to keep those brief. The original Divine Dungeon series by Dakota Krout came out before this, but in the timeline, this book is before it in the timeline. So, heads up, you've been warned.
Yeah, so minor spoilers from the main Divine Dungeon series, right?
Yep.
Okay, so heads up there, but we're only going to go through spoilers on book 1 of the Artorian archives. And for those new to the channel, just hanging out, joining us, the Divine Dungeon series, I want to say, was like one of our first 3 lit RPGs. It's right up there with The Land and Divine Dungeon. I think those were like the 2 that kind of got us into the genre. And we've been binging anything and everything lit RPG ever since. You can go look at our previous Geek Outs. Like, we wanted to get to this book sooner, but I think we were maybe like 30, 40 Geek Outs in, and we're like, almost half of our Geek Outs so far are Dakota Krout. Let's try to give some of the other authors some love. Since then, we have found the Mountaindale Press, Dakota Krout's publishing group company. Their Discord is a lot of fun. They're very active. You can actually talk to the author, Dennis, aka Floof, himself over there. He's been a great guy to just geek out with and talk about the world. So excited that the universe is just getting that much bigger and we are learning that much more in the series. And before we forget, we'll bow. And there we go. So I'm trying to remember. You listened to it when we picked it up a while ago, right? Or did you just listen to it here a couple weeks ago when we started telling our buddy White
So
Thatch that we're finally getting to it?
I've read up to book 3, and I took a look at it when we first got it, but it was a glimpse just because we were continuing on with other things.
Yeah.
And then because a lot of our people know that we like Dakota Krout and his work and his worlds, I want to say it was book 6 came out, and everyone was like, "Oh man, there's so much that gets explained in reference to Dakota Krout's other series, Completionist Chronicles, which is kind of the continuation after the Divine Dungeon series, and you got to get to it. You got to get to it. So here we are going through it.
Here we are.
Yeah.
And so minor spoilers. We've been chatting with Floof, aka the author Dennis, and book 8 just came out, Artifact, staying true with the Divine Dungeon naming structure where we got all A's here. The Divine Dungeon, we had all D's. Ritualist, the first arc, we had all R's for the Completionist Chronicles there.
Yeah, I
So,
think Dakota Krout said each arc gets a letter, and he's going to spell out ritual. That way, you can
Hmm.
have the nice, pretty covers all lined up on the bookshelf.
And say the ritual is complete.
Yep.
Oh, that's commitment to a pun right there. I remember reading through early on um, some of the reviews on Goodreads, and like one of the few complaints we'd see was just like the over the top puns and kind of like breaking the fourth wall, et cetera, et cetera. And he just doubled down, like
I
definition of dad jokes. And then here, Artorian, we got grandpa, right?
yeah.
So bringing it back. The series is continuing. I think Floof said he's like working on book 11 at the point. So like if you enjoy this stuff, there's a lot more to come. And oh,
Now,
go ahead.
now into the series or into the book.
Should we start actually talking about the book now instead of
Yeah,
gushing
yeah,
about
yeah.
how much we enjoy this world and everything? Um, so yeah, minor spoilers on the main series. We do meet him in book 3 of the Divine Dungeon, and here we go back to the origin story, right?
Yeah, this is the origin story of our Sunshine and Love Mage or Pillow
Mhm,
Mage,
mhm.
Arturian.
Where it all began, but didn't quite begin. Like we get a prologue
I
before he joins the Fringe, and then like we pick up when he's in his 50s, right?
yeah,
Like an
yeah, I
old
guess that's
man.
true.
And from what we know with
But beforehand
cultivation,
doesn't have a whole lot of impact on the good RPG aspects of the world, which is
oh
cultivation.
really?
I that we
Oh
know of. That
really?
we know of.
There's
Um,
some hints and some foreshadowing, and yeah, like we learn more about the prologue later, not book 1. No spoilers for the rest. But we get to see the prologue, kind of like a glimpse into his past, and then chapter 1, we start out in the Fringe, where he is one of 2 elders, pretty much polar opposites. And at this point in his life, he pretty much anticipates he has maybe a season or 2 left, because his health is just continuing to deteriorate, right?
Yeah, and so this is the point where minor spoilers or connections to the other series because he's
They've been
in
warned enough. Here we go.
the Fringe, and I'm trying to remember the conversation in the main series. It's either with Father Richard or it's when the guild comes to survey Cal initially, because they talk about there being a celestial dungeon and a pure celestial dungeon creating a lot of havoc, similar to as infernal dungeons. Um, Throughout the book, we believe it to be dormant. When we get the oh, I'm drawing a blank, the religious clerics. When we get the clerics to come over, they pretty much, we get a little bit more backstory into it, how it essentially was taking the celestial cultivation and adding a bit of like madness or insanity to the people who were cultivating on it, which could be part of the dungeon, but could also be part of the celestial power because we get like a glimpse into it. Especially when Arturian is going through and playing with the different forms of corruption. He ends up, describing them, and he gives a detailed description of Celestial that he just felt, righteous and empowered, and could be part of it, could be part of the dungeon. Um,
It's one of the aspects I've enjoyed most about picking this series up, because like Divine Dungeon was Dakota Krout's first published series, and it's been amazing to watch the authors grow, especially as we get further along in the series and everything. But as we were going through it, there's like just so much more I wanted to learn about the world and cultivation and how the laws of magic and everything work in this universe. And we start to get some of that. Like it doesn't quite come out and give us a playbook, but what's
I
amazing
it's a
is
great
Go ahead.
It's a great way to give another character's perspective and to see more of the world develop through their eyes, because through the main series there's a lot of question. It just has to do with Dakota Krout's writing style. He's very good with his Easter eggs and connecting
Hmm.
things from previous books, as
Hmm.
well as his puns. Please check out the Pungeon on his Discord server.
Uh,
And a little bit, side gush here. A little bit, I've hung out with him on the Discord server. He is right what you know. He's very punny and similar witty banter with the people on there. So it's all natural. Anyway,
yeah.
so it's nice to be able to hang out in the Divine Dungeon world more, as well as he has another series. I think the first book's called The Hunt. That's gonna be, or it's the series is called Lion's Lineage. So we'll get to
I'm
kind of see
super
like
excited about that.
King Henry's upbringing and all that. But anyway, back to Axiom.
Yeah, it's always a challenge, finding that balance, I think, for authors in like how to introduce the world. And so with Artorian, he's literally figuring out each step of cultivation, and at such a late stage in life. Um, in the main series, like they always talk about how cultivators, they try to, if it doesn't happen young, it's hard to do it when they're older. And we learn through Artorian, who has 4 of his affinity channels open, that his body is just full of corruption, right? And that's one of the reasons why it's harder for them to cultivate later. But once they start cultivating, their life expands. And the
Well, and that's where like even later in the Divine Dungeon series, they all use the same premise of having a clean center, getting rid of the corruption. By the end, we figure out secrets about wisps, which I don't know what you're talking about. And
do we?
then
Do we
even
not?
though we're getting more detailed, I guess, operations for how the magic system works,
Hmm.
Arturian has his own style or philosophy or
Hmm.
way that he utilizes it, which we get to see a lot of that throughout this book, where people keep looking at his cultivation and they're like, well, I can't tell what rank you are because you don't fall into the traditional, typical uh, ranking structure.
Yeah, yeah, and that kind of like just embodies a lot of his philosophies. And we like to steal quotes and kind of like ponder them and everything, but like he truly embodies like for every problem there's a creative solution, right? Like they're busy
I
telling him
pulled
all
a
he can't
couple.
do. And then you got a couple fun quotes to play, like our pillow loving
Or so this series
grandpa
so
has.
far is definitely the wise old man. Um, so here's one. Everything is either a choice you can live with or a choice you cannot. There's no reason to second guess, merely pour all your effort and being into the world you wish to see around you. And for me, it's quite profound. I'm probably overanalyzing, but it essentially, I find myself overthinking a lot of things. So just to, have that, put it somewhere, and I, it's not worth your effort to worry about it. It's not worth your effort to second guess it. The stats and the data speak for itself. A lot more is nuance and emotional, but yeah,
Mhm.
and then the other one that I guess I've got, it's kind of like a string of them. So the second one is essentially towards the beginning when he's giving the sproutlings their names.
Right. And
And I believe this
so for
is,
context, in the fringe, they don't give people names until they come of age. And your name is pretty much your job, right? In
yeah,
the
yeah, much
fringe.
like a chair is to be sat on, or, how choppy
That was the
chops wood.
analogies.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Carry on.
It's just. it's so solid. I don't know what it means. The name just sounds like it's filled more than I can get a hold of. And, there's little context in the middle there, and it goes, well, that's part of the point, isn't it? You'll grow up with this, you'll shape it. People will recognize your name based on what you've done and what you say. However, unlike a simple meaning, I've given you a complicated one. So, I, this,
This
yet
was
again, if
when
I
like
can
his
take it
his
out of
adopted
context,
grandkids.
but put
He
it back in, a
so
lot of
sorry. Go ahead.
people look at their idols or, people who are very successful and they think they can't do it or that it's a giant mountain to overcome. But, you know, a journey of 1,000 steps starts with that first step. So you've got to develop it and design it for
Hmm.
yourself or into kind of the third section of that, continuing with the same quote. Another secret for you. Certain things in life may look complicated, but really they're made up of a large number of small things. They are simply coming together. Small things look like a big mess as we're only used to seeing the whole. When you have a good grasp on the small things, the big ones will subtly make sense. And because I'm talking about me, if you get overwhelmed with the big picture, chop it up into manageable size goals. If the little ones seem like too much, look at the big picture and matter of perspective. Yeah, so it
There's just so
definitely.
much good stuff in there from Artorian. Um, so one of the most important questions for you, Pete, did it have enough action for you? Like it definitely hit on the old grandpa vibes and pieces. Um,
I'll give him a pass because the end did have a collective fight scene, and this
okay.
this was definitely a hyperbolic time chamber kind of moment. Or,
Hmm.
when Goku first figures out that he can do stuff, or I guess Gohan as he's running away from the giant T-Rex or whatnot. These are growing pains. Yeah, it's not. No, no. There was not nearly enough combat.
I was about to say, don't hold
Um,
back now. We know if there's not
but
90% combat in there. But like
it
it's
also, you could tell it was heavily influenced by a different author because Dakota Krout, I guess there's more comic relief, but it's a little more rigid and serious. For example, Dale is pretty rigid and, trying to figure everything out. And then Hans is the flirtatious comic relief. For this one, we more like had serious moments and then we had moments of compassion. For example, when we're going and we're finally in the end fight scene as we're taking our first couple shots on the tower, and then
mhm,
we turn around and we've got sugar gliders around us and we're, helping them out and enjoying that scene. So it's
mhm.
yeah, definitely different influence.
Yeah.
Aha. Well,
It's a
thank you for
great
joining us.
standalone series. But if you've already read the Divine Dungeon series, like it's just that much more fun to really see. Because Artorian, when he shows up, he is just so different than the typical cultivator when we meet him in book 3 of the Divine Dungeon, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he
Well, because
becomes
everybody else we dealt with at that point is very power hungry and arrogant, and he's the opposite. He's very grandfatherly and,
chilling up on the
supportive and
top of the
understanding.
tower,
Yeah.
almost completely in the buff with his pillows and his hookah,
Yep.
talking about sunshine and love and rainbows and all that good stuff. Um, yeah, different humor, right? Like we get to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
how sly Artorian is and the kind of like pranks and practical jokes he plays, like with the pillow. Um, completely just keeps the head cleric off base and plays it down. He's like, oh, 12 by 12. And he's thinking like, oh, it's a typical pillow. Like, yes, I'm going to pull one over on this guy, of course. And then it shows up and it's 12 by 12 feet.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a pillow. That's bigger than a mattress. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And he starts from being predicting that he has maybe a season left, right? After he names the kids, and then the Raiders hit immediately afterwards.
Yep.
And the kids get swept away. Would really love to dive in and do some speculation on the main Raider there, just because I see some other similarities in the previous lore. But yeah, like we hang out with the fringe just long enough to get the feels, and then they're gone. And Artorian's the only survivor there. And just that drive, right, to save his kids.
And that's, I guess, a couple of the comments I've read through Goodreads and others were, the sad aspect of he has to kill, this handicapped kid who's choppy and who has done nothing but protect everyone. And the fear of, literally his whole understanding or people who he's been hanging out with are dead. And yeah, it builds and it grows. But for me, it was very much
it's quite an emotional
Star
roller coaster
Wars,
ride
you can't go back because your whole family's dead, which is a good starting point. But after that scene happens there are so many questions about. So he kind of plays it off as if it's a psychological thing, and because he's so smart and well versed, so essentially he's, people think he's dead. He's in his, I don't know what you would call it, by a bonfire, and he sees all his previous iterations where he sees himself as he was the warrior, and
before
he sees
the fringe
himself and all these
That's
other personas, and he kind of plays it off as, people grow and develop, but I feel like there's a lot more there, and I don't quite, I don't know, it's complicated because part of me was thinking like, okay, it's connected to the fringe and how the fringe makes people mad. And then as we figure out later, he's got 4 affinity channels, so he's got to be constantly absorbing, essence as well as
Yeah, he
corruption.
was just
So was that
passively absorbing for most of it.
yeah, and since he has 4, was that part of it? Was it a way to protect yourself, similar to like how people PTSD, where they have to compartmentalize it and move on? It was it acted as if this was going to be the final time. I'm curious to see what other developments happen. It was a
Well,
weird, cool,
he
interestingly weird thing.
he keeps the name Artorian,
Or
where at
no,
that moment
he
he
made
picks
the
it.
name up.
He picked it, but
Yeah.
that's the name we know him by when we meet him in the main Divine Dungeon series.
Yeah,
So
but we still don't
safe to
know who he
assume
is in the Completionist Chronicle series, because by that
this
point,
is true.
minor spoilers, he's in tight with Cal. So yeah.
I'm
What's his name? Because
excited
we
to
know,
see where it
yeah,
goes.
I can't say those things. Anyway, but yeah, so he heard someone in the camp say like art historian, and he's like, oh, it's good to listen to women, so we'll go with Artorian. Yeah, Artorian.
Yep.
So interesting way of creating the whole name.
Well, we kind of get to learn about cultivation in both of the series, and there's a lot of like introspection when it comes to cultivating and like the visualization, as well as just like in life, the whole visualization of like, this is how I'm going to move forward after, like you said, this his whole family is pretty much slaughtered, and
Yeah.
then he mercy kills Choppy just because like he has a background of a warrior. And we get to see some of that, like when the cleric's set up and he kind of like negotiates to get aid for 3 years as he tries to figure things out and cultivate and bargains for the memory stone, even though he's already kind of started doing his own thing with his core. And later he ends up picking up a bow, and he pretty much starts out in the beginning of the book where his back is hunched, he's like nothing but skin and bone. And then through the power of cultivation, he already has such an advantage being able to absorb through 4 different affinity channels and like rebuild his body and heal himself. Yeah.
Well, and so if I could bounce around, we see him at the beginning, and he's a decrepit old man. He's 50, he
Mm-hmm.
looks like he's 90, and then we
Mm-hmm.
get to that final fight, and he's pretty beefed up. But because of the way his cultivation works, he essentially sacrifices, 95% of his cultivation throughout the fight, as well as healing the sugar glider, and, it
Mm-hmm.
looks like his bacon's cooked at the end, so yeah, it's not going to be as hard redoing it after you know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's yeah, lost a lot of potential,
Yeah.
and is going to have to rebuild back up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think they have any sensu beans, but
Uh, there we go. Our
yep.
DBZ, our references in there. Gotta get at least one each stream.
I've had a couple.
Yeah. You got a couple in there. Um, that was something that I was kind of curious about because, again, going from memory, it's been a minute since I've done the Divine Dungeon series. But when we meet him, I want to say he's in the C ranks, because I remember it being kind of like a big deal when Dale was looking at who
Oh
they wanted
yeah,
to run the
looking for
school.
an administrator, and everyone was like, "Oh, might makes right. If they're not a high enough cultivation level, how are
Yeah,
they going to keep them in line? How are they going to punish
yeah.
them?" And he's like, "That's not how we punish people. We're not about doing that. That's how everybody else has done it."
And we got to see him kind of climb his way up, but they imply he just had like so much corruption in his system, and we kind of see how he deals with that and adjusts it. But that corruption is a barrier each step of the way up, right? Like they talk about the yeah, there we go. Good to see you, Dennis. Hakan equals Amazonian confirmed. Nice catch.
Mm.
I was wondering about that with the structure of favoring the female initiates and everything, because the Amazonians play a big part in the main series. So that's another fun thing about just all of these series. Those little details and the rereadability in it. I definitely noticed
Oh
a lot
yeah.
more at
Oh
the
yeah.
second and the third and the fourth listen for it.
Well, that, and it's ever expanding because it, yeah, it. I would recommend publication order. Each of the series can be a standalone, but Dakota Krout is great for his Easter eggs of causal connections, as well as Dennis Vanderkerken playing in the space. Dennis, since I've read up to 3, I can say has a very more, I guess, measured pace, where Dakota is very progressive, and I wish more things got fleshed out. Each of the books that I know of the first 3 are kind of like their own, I don't want to say arc, but episode, versus a lot happens and it goes pretty quick for any that are, Divine Dungeon or Completionist Chronicles is pretty quick on the progression.
Which, after spending so many books in the universe, um, it's nice to stop and play a little bit longer in the first 3 books and get those moments and to see the world. I don't want to spoil the next couple, but we spend most of our time in the fringe, yet we get to see so much more of the magic system, more of the lore, like the area, yeah, as well as just like the origin of one of our favorite cultivators from the main series, right?
Yeah, as well as even though we're learning more about the world, we're breaking everything you thought you knew. Because everybody takes the stance of you have to use the Beast Core at the beginning and get rid of all your corruption and then keep it out. And, nobles have better ones, but Arturian was basically like fall over dead, and he's found ways to kind of capsule or capture his essence as well as due to his affinities or
Mhm.
whatever, he's able to keep them moving so that he doesn't fall over. And then we get to see when he's going to his neck snapping party with the bandits, how he is able to force corruption into someone else, or as well as with the sugar glider, he essentially plays sugar daddy, and ends up beefing up the sugar glider, but
Mhm.
in a way that's not conventional by using celestial corruption eh,
This book
to
challenges what we know of quote unquote corruption, and I really enjoy.
I wish I
He's
grabbed
a
some of those.
Yeah, he's a philosopher, right? Like
Hmm.
we don't know a whole lot at this point, but we know that he was a scholar. And so just kind of his approach to always question like what everybody just tells him as gospel, pun intended, as we're dealing with clerics. And go ahead.
Or that was I so some people don't appreciate Dakota literally throwing his name into every book. I am very bad with names, and I got a chuckle out of all of the like. That's the only reason I can remember the name Dakota Krout is because of his original Divine Dungeon series. Anyway, in Axiom, he has right after. Oh, Arturian is like, hey, tell me about cultivation to help me sleep, and he can't sleep. And then Dakota is chatting with him, kind of fleshing out or talking about possible constraints of cultivation. And
Mm,
yeah, I appreciate the touch because I suck with names, and having it referenced that way was a
yeah,
nice touch.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Doubling back, what did you think of the scene with the Raiders?
Which one?
Because like, so the
Or
earlier
with
one you were
him
talking
snapping
about,
necks, or with them ransacking
yeah,
the
yeah,
village.
because we know
I
that
wish I
he,
grabbed those quotes, but he goes into it's essentially for me, I thought of it like D&D, how you've got the panel of 9 where you've got like oh, lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good. And anyway, he does a much better job, and I don't have the quote in front of me, where he kind of breaks down and essentially says the one that he saved or that he let go was not too far gone, where the rest of them were doing it because that's who they are. And yeah,
Mhm,
not a very good description, but yes, he does have a great philosophical. You have to
yes,
want change. You can't make people change. People aren't going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. They need to want it.
it was a nice reminder too for us, because like we go through this emotional journey with him as he's pretty much on a death march, um, and he has that conversation with the human who was raised by dwarves,
Or the
and
dwarf who was raised by humans.
sure, yeah, we'll go with that. Um, and
Pretty sure he's a dwarf. Yeah.
yeah, dwarf raised by humans. My bad. Um, so because he's in good with him, he gets like that private moment with the Raiders to go in and ask questions, and they say, "Hey, like don't interrupt him." Yet, like he's an ear for everybody. Like he's like people are going to him in the camp to talk to them about their problems, like even the higher ups and everything. And he just seems like this grandfatherly guy. And then that scene, I want to say, is about like halfway through the book where it's just like reminds you, it's like, oh wait, he's on this suicide march. Like he's doing everything he can to save his children at all cost, and even at potential risk to himself. He's, you know, he only needs two of them, is pretty much how he outlines it in the beginning. And just snap, 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 finds a cultivator, finds a way to get rid of some of his corruption. Kind of made me scratch my head where it's like, wait, hold on, like F10, F11 or whatever. It's like, wait a minute, that's not how the system works. Are we breaking stuff? Oh wait,
yeah.
Kaplop. Yeah.
I think I might have had another quote that I did poorly on my notes, so I can't remember her name. Anyway, the quote is, "Your fate, my dear, fate as chosen by the only person who has a say over it." And it's when he's talking to the newly appointed cleric of, that's taken over,
Mm-hmm.
and she just kind of opens up to him because he's got that disarming manner about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's pretty much like, fate this, fate that, it doesn't matter. People use that, throw that word around to try and control you and set you up for whatever. And he, writes Jibra? Jibra's fate? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. We'll
Yeah,
go
yeah,
with
yeah.
that anyway.
Jira. It's such.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it's a strong moment, and definitely more the grandpa vibe.
Well, not to keep gushing, but like anybody that's watched some of our previous ones, that's one of the reasons why we enjoy reading so much.
And why
Yes,
people need to read
it's
more.
and why people need to read more, right? Like, yes, Peter loves his combat. Yes, we enjoy our puns and laugh out loud moments and living vicariously because we don't have the time for a part-time job, full-time job to do the dailies and the MMO bits. But like, there's just so many great takeaways, especially in this book. Like, yeah, it's a fun book, but there's some of those real emotional moments where it's like just fun little reminders that like we have the say, right? Like our voice is the only one that matters when it comes to our fate. So stop letting others dictate it. Seize the day. If you want to cultivate, start focusing on your
Yeah,
key
I guess
spiral. And
that's the
if you can't do a
other,
key spiral, just keep making rings and, doing all that fun stuff.
or that's the, I think it's a different person he's talking to, where he's like, he's in the recovery room towards the beginning, and
Mhm,
oh, he's like, I believe in you, because you're here, you're trying to get better, you're doing what you can, stuck in cultivation. I believe in you, try harder, do more, you know.
mhm.
Yeah, and it's yeah, inspirational.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, yeah.
So we got the Salt Village. Then we started meeting with the Inquisitors, or not Inquisitors,
Clerics,
clerics.
the choir.
We slowly start cultivating, figuring more stuff out. We end up making circles. Ba, ba,
What
ba.
do you think about the switchy scene or Elder Switch shortly after the Raiders? Because I guess Artorian wasn't the only one that survived. Like she also survived, but she was not coherent,
Catatonic?
right? Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah,
that's the right word. Uncoherent? Incoherent?
yeah.
PTSD overdose. I don't know. Anyway, I so uh, she needed to die. That's okay. I'm okay with that. That's the opposite end of where we would like to be, or where the other encouraging factors comes to.
Hmm.
I think it was a good developmental thing for our main character getting a bit of closure with that.
Right.
Um,
He
but
even
yeah,
talked about
that's
like starting out to have 1,000 questions, then 100, then 10.
then
And
there's
then I
only
had
one.
one, and then he didn't have any more because he saw the title from the head cleric or whatnot previously. Um, and yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, she sold out her family because she wanted stuff and she let the greed consume her,
Yeah,
and she was
yeah.
very in the mindset of might makes right, which is, sidestep back to the Divine Dungeon series or original one. Um, that's why Arturian got the position, because he wasn't a high rank cultivator, but he came very well renowned from school and
Hmm.
other things
Hmm.
and his application and all of that. Um, and I'm sure due to the un unaffiliated essences in the dungeon was a big pull for him. But anyway, it's yeah, that was she grew up in the fringe and she didn't really have much hope for going anywhere else.
Hmm.
Sidestep about the piece of paper with the signature on it and the fringe being dormant until we get that later scene when he does find one of his kids. Can't remember her name.
Passes over ownership or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and he passes over ownership, and essentially the dungeon, so to speak, reawakens. And yeah, it's just adding more layers into it. I think it had part to do with how if you get cut off from the cultivation and you can no longer cultivate, you slowly wither and you can only use what you have. So I assume the dungeon did something similar, kind of, pulling into itself, or it could have been a, oh, long way
Lunella.
to the top. Makes me kind of think of maybe it was just on its ascension.
Hmm.
Anyway, but now we do know it is alive, it is awake. I'm very curious to see more of the developments there,
Hmm.
but depending on how everything plays out, it's going to be a slow climb because the place has been, essentially scraped clean and nobody wants to go there, and the fringe have their own rules and yada yada yada.
Yeah, it was fun to see another part of the world, the fringe, and then the little bit of closure we get of getting Lunella and Wuxius back.
Oh yeah, Wuxley,
Um, yeah,
Wuxius.
um, Wux. We'll just go with Wux. Um,
Well, and that's what just makes things more complicated, because it starts off and he gets on this mission and he's going off to save the five of his kids. We find two of them, the other three were younger, get sent off to a different bandit camp,
mhm.
and he's creating more children, just like the
Hold up. He's not creating more
or
children. He's adopting.
he's becoming a grandfatherly figure to more
Hmm.
individuals. We have the
Hmm.
scene with the medic dwarf who is essentially saying like, I see what you're doing. I've seen people on a similar thing. Pain isn't an issue for you. You're on the war path,
You better come
but
back, old man.
you can't die. You better come
Yeah.
back because there are other people who get joy out of you being here. And then he has this all revelation of, man, I have
Hmm.
been a fool, and yes, I have to come back, and
Hmm.
it's not going to be open and shut, but that's okay. It's not going to be just the five. And then, as we know, when he's in the Divine Dungeon universe, he still doesn't have all of his children saved, or maybe there's more adopted children that he has to go save, because that's when he, not going to say it, very in-depth, detailed stuff for the other series, but if you know, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Fun book, super excited. We ended up picking up the rest of the first 7 before the 8th came out on Audible. So definitely going to keep geeking out on this series, working it into our rotation.
Yep. Need to.
Having a whole lot of fun with it. Yeah.
The ending was also quite suspenseful because we got the kids out, and at first I was a little sad because I thought the giant pillow didn't survive, but rethinking about it, it's still in the wagon that the kids are going to take back. So, giant pillow, the 12 by 12, is going to live in the fringe. That's okay,
Uh,
as long as we lost our signature robe.
the
But
things we care about. After
hey,
all that
yeah,
energy and effort and hassle he went through, we
yep,
want to make sure the
yep.
pillow survives.
I It's comic relief. It serves a
Mm-hmm.
purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, what was I gonna say? That, we free the children, we defeat the main boss or the mini boss, and
Mm-hmm.
then we're still, being hunted
It was a
down
pretty
or
intense
attacked
battle
by,
too.
yeah, the bandits. And we figure out a little bit as far as the forest, which, everyone's like, oh no, don't go in there, you can't go in there. He ends up using his essence sight and being able to see the essence charged roots or whatnot that several of the
Mm-hmm.
raiders or bandits, die to.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get that epilogue where it's essentially like, oh, you are the sun cultivator, or I forget what they call him, but insight into more happening going on in other directions.
Yeah, yeah. Always good for the cliffhanger, right? Um, trying to pull it up real quick. Um, Starlight Spirit,
Starlight Spirit.
right? Right. Which we learn that he's cultivating from the sun and the stars.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah. That ending, that cliffhanger. There's definitely a reason why we continued on to do the next couple books just to see what happens, and then work so hard not to do spoilers on this one. Um, so if people have gotten this far listening to the series, I know your official party stance is go in publication order. Do you feel that people could start here in the series and be all right?
So the rereadability, due to all the causal connections and Easter eggs, you can
Mm-hmm.
really start book one of any of his series.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just when or if you make the connection, and none of the connections are simply Easter eggs. They're
Additional
interesting
details. You don't miss
additional
out on stuff.
details that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
good to know, but any of them are great. If you want a shorter books in the series, very progressive, fast paced intro to the world. I would say the first Divine Dungeon series. If you want more of a, you know, comical grandpa, um,
Philosophical.
philosophical, I would say start with the Artorian archives. If you came here because you love the lit RPGs, I would say start off with the Completionist Chronicles, because I would say Divine Dungeon and Arturian Archives are lit RPGs, but they're more in the RPG aspect than they are the MMORPG. And I would only
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that because there is a stats hierarchy for ranking, but it's not 100% laid out. It's not stats for the weapon, stats for you. It's very much you have internal chi, chakra stuff, essence that you can manipulate, and it's more about your proficiency in utilizing it. Yeah.
They're closer to fantasy than lit RPG, and it's not as steep of a learning curve for people new to the genre.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. I know we bounced all over the place, but we're kind of approaching our typical wrap up time. Final thoughts, things we missed. I know it's always hard to get everything in, especially when we're talking a 10+ hour book. Amazing origin story for one of our favorite sunshine and love mages that we meet in the original Divine Dungeon series. Super pumped to learn more and see kind of like some of the connections behind the scenes. We did a lot of speculation about in the Divine Dungeon and the Completionist Chronicles, just stuff we didn't know. And we've had a couple of our friends comment on previous Geek Outs where they're like, hey, you'll see this at book 5 of this series. Like you'll
Yep.
see that at book 7 of that series. So it's really hard not to just binge hardcore and just like get all those details.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to going back and after we get through, or at least get current with this series, to like
See
do a
how
whole
close or
reread.
completely off we were. Yeah.
Yeah. Get all 20+ books. Do it in one go. Yeah.
So as far as book 1 is concerned, not enough combat, sadly. Very great for
You always
quotes
want more
and
combat.
philosophical moments. Ending was satisfying, but also adding
It
more.
wrapped up the
Or
arc well, and then we
yeah,
get enough
close
of a
off the
teaser.
arc, and then we feel like we're gonna go off in a different direction, which makes sense because most of the church people, could draw on a blank, are gonna be
Clerics,
going on
fire,
clerics, yeah, are gonna be going on their way.
paladins.
So yeah,
Yeah.
now we get to dive deep into the belly of the beast of, hey, don't go in that forest. Just kidding. I'm
The
awesome, and I'm
Phantom. The
yeah.
Phantom Forest.
Which
He
if you
play acted as a phantom, and now the phantoms are out calling him Starlight Spirit. What's about to happen?
Well, that, and then in the other series, it's the Phantom Mountains. And then you got that
Oh,
whole, I can't think of it right now, but bad stuff happens in the Phantom Mountains thing. Anyway, so interested, definitely continue with the series. Um, yeah, different flavor from most of Dakota Krout stuff. A little more fleshed out, which is exciting because
right.
that's probably one of my bigger downsides to
There we
some of it.
go.
Death
Good
is
lookout.
everywhere in the Phantom Mountains. Thank you
You
very
hear that a
much.
lot in the original series.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So all the little connections as the world expands and we learn more. Um, yeah. If you guys haven't already, go ahead and hop on the Mountaindale Press Discord and keep geeking out with all those guys on the rest of the series there. Uh, what we have coming up next, Pete?
So this Thursday at 1 p.m.,
Changing it
it's
up.
a little earlier due to scheduling conflicts. This Thursday, the 15th, 1 p.m., is going to be Salvation, which is Life Reset, Book 6. It is supposed to conclude the series. I've not gone all the way through it. I
It's
thoroughly
amazing.
enjoy it. It is I guess if I had to say spoiler-free stuff about the series, it is a lit RPG that is very stats heavy. It is unique in the sense that it plays primarily from the monster side versus the player side. There is interesting time dilation aspects, as well as it has a lot of like civilization or town building aspects and, logistics and management. Yeah, yeah. Anything else you'd like to say about the book coming up?
Just that in a lot of ways, it kind of has similar vibes to the time I got reincarnated as a slime, the anime. Um, One of our first series we started out on, a lot of fun. Glad to finally wrap it up and get the conclusion there. Peter said on the previous stream, definitely worth picking up an audio format because sound booth theater is incredible. Those guys just do a great job performance wise.
Yes.
Yeah. And then next Sunday, what do we have?
We are going to be continuing the series. So Sunday, July 18th, we're going to we are going to keep with 5 p.m. Eastern, going over book 2 in the Artorian Archive series. Um, this might hold our Sunday slot for a little while, except for the week after this, we have oh, a avid watcher who's going to be joining us for a separate one. But anyway, we're going to be continuing the series.
Trying to catch up. We wanna know the lore and the Easter eggs connecting everything in the background. So yeah, going to be having fun there. Appreciate everyone that joined us for the live stream and those of you catching this and the repeat who couldn't join us live. Thank you, Dennis Vanderkerken, aka Mr. Floof, and the rest of you guys for chatting with us. And yeah, looking forward to keep the conversation going in Discord. Until then,
Yeah. I don't know. Do we have any spoiler-free things to say about this?
I mean, we just covered the first book, so if
Yeah.
they made it this far, we now get to see what happens in the Phantom Forest with our Starlight Spirit. Don't want to do spoilers. Definitely learn more. Get to see it. Yeah. What else you got?
Yeah. It's hard. The way the first one ends, you can't really say, but it does.
Tears.
Or,
Tears are what happens, says Kara.
I keep hearing that and seeing that in comments, and maybe I'm just bitter or whatever.
It
Like when
is a very
we
emotional book
killed
for lit RPG.
Choppy at the beginning, I was
Oh yeah,
like, it was a mercy because he's seen the wound and he knew he couldn't do anything about it. So, eh, people die.
yeah, yeah. We need to level up that personability stat of yours.
This is true.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
So you've been
so
forewarned. Have your Kleenexes ready. Tears on the way. Um, had a blast geeking out with you guys. Anything else, Pete?
yeah, that kind of concludes it. Thursday, 1 p.m. is Salvation, Book 6. And then Sunday, the 18th, 5 p.m., we're continuing the series, diving into Book 2. And yeah, tears continue to flow through the series.
Yeah. Looking forward to geeking out with you guys then.
Yep. And that's gonna wrap it up for us. Bye. Oh,
Bye.
camera's over here.